It is SNL. Landry Locker, Cody Stutes with you. What looks to be perhaps kind of the first down week between the end of minicamp and the start of training camp. And we're going to get into the biggest roster questions for the Houston Texans. And I think we got to start here. Wide receiver. And I want to attack this in a number of ways, but let's look at the wide receiver position from the short term. Wide receiver position from the short term. Who do you think in 2025 is going to be wide receiver 2?
Christian Kirk is the answer to who's wide receiver 2 for me. I just feel like the usefulness of the slot receiver, him being an experienced player. Obviously, the injuries the past 2 years have limited him on the field, but those aren't like recurring injuries. They've been 2 one-off injuries. So it's not like he's got a knee issue you have to worry about. And it just feels like if the Texans are going to handle some of the challenges for this offensive line, you got to be able to win quick and get the ball out fast. And that benefits those slot guys. And Kirk's done a good job showcasing that he can win quick and be an answer to some of the questions the defenses present the Texans.
Yeah, I think Kirk kind of arrived in minicamp.
Captain Kirk has arrived. I repeat, Captain Kirk has arrived.
And I don't know that he really has too much pushback when it comes to this. We did talk about, in anticipation of Nick Caley's offense, how the slots were used. It was a big emphasis of focus. It led to my line of questioning with Nick Caserio. We saw them in New England use multiple slots. We always talk about Welker and Edelman, and then Edelman and Amendola, and then what happened with the Rams. And it does feel like there's an emphasis on slot receivers, and it feels like it's kind of a strength of C.J. Stroud throwing the guys out of the slot. And the guy who stuck out the most was Christian Kirk, and it would make sense in the short term because you follow the money. He's the second highest paid wide receiver on your team, and it might be the highest if you look at the cap number. And it's a short term type of thing to where I don't even know that there's really much pushback, assuming everyone's healthy, as far as who wide receiver 2 will be. I don't even know that anyone can step to Christian Kirk in that area. I think he is by far wide receiver 2. I don't know how close it is.
I just don't see how either of the rookies, Jaden Higgins or Jalen Noel, put together enough consistency to outproduce Christian Kirk. Like, could there be a stretch where maybe they're outproducing him, but 17 games, I just feel like Kirk's a pretty safe wager here. If you were saying, I'm going to bet on this guy to be the second best wide receiver on the Texans, Kirk feels like the clear favorite and a pretty safe wager as well. And one more thing too about being able to distribute and still get the ball to the slot. Even when guys are having success outside, you can still find slot guys when you're peak CJ Stroud. You just look back to Ohio State and his ability to get the ball to everybody when they had all that great talent outside, and he was still getting the ball to Egbuka over the middle a bunch too.
Yeah, and it also helps to have a good slot receiver if there's offensive line issues.
Yep.
Like the Texans. So I think Kirk is distant too. Let's go to wide receiver 3. Wide receiver 3 is a little bit tough. There's some competition there. It seems like everybody at some point behind Kirk and Collins, they had decent stretches. There was days where Higgins was the star. There were early on, Noel looked really good. Hutchinson looks like he's a little bit better. He sticks out a little bit more. I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be WR3. Justin Watson, we really haven't seen a ton with him, but DeMeco Ryans has had a lot of good things to say about him. So who is wide receiver 3? I think it's a lot closer of a competition than wide receiver 2. I would lean Higgins just because of everything he can do. And here's the other thing, and I think you can kind of connect this to the wide receiver 2 discussion. Nico Collins misses games, man. Like, and the reality of the situation is it probably looks a lot different if you have Nico Collins out and then you have Higgins lining up where Nico Collins is on top of all the other ways they're going to use him. And I think the minimum amount of games that we've seen Nico Collins miss has been 2+. And I say 2+ because he left early against the Jets. So there's likelihood that there's going to be times where Higgins basically is Nico Collins in this offense. Not saying he produces like him, but the targets go away. So when you factor that in, I would lean Higgins at wide receiver 3.
Higgins is the safe wager here. And I wonder too, like, if he gets Nico's reps, does that make it easier for a guy like Noel to get on the field on a consistent basis? Like, pretend Nico's done for 2 weeks. Hey, Nico Collins isn't playing. Higgins is sort of the pseudo replacement for Nico Collins. Does he get a little of the attention, and then maybe it gets Noel on the field or gets Justin Watson on the field a little bit? But as far as that third wide receiver, when guys are healthy, I do believe it's going to be Higgins. I also feel like they could put him in the slot for some weird matchup stuff if they want to. I just feel like the opportunities will be afforded to him. And boy, if he's going to be able to take advantage of the opportunities like he did on a couple of days there in OTAs and minicamp, he's going to be wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I got an interesting message yesterday before we even decided, because I think we decided we were going to talk about this on Saturday. And on Sunday, I got an interesting text message from someone. It's weird. It was Brian Broaddus, who works in Dallas, his son, who is all of a sudden a college sophomore. I remember him when he was young, but he's in a dynasty keeper league. And he texted me and said he had I think he said he was in the second or third round. And he asked me, he said, is Higgins worth kicking the tires on in a dynasty league? I started thinking about it, and I don't know. He ended up going with Matthew Golden, which I would bet more on Matthew Golden immediately being the man in Green Bay than I would Higgins validating fantasy value. But I do look at this like in the short and long term. How do we look at this if we're kind of balancing these two things and you're buying short and long-term stock? Because the short-term stock is definitely Kirk, but if it's the short and long-term stock and a combination of the two, what are you buying?
It's Higgins for me. And did you give him the lecture you always give me when I bring up Dynasty Fantasy about how you don't care and you don't like it? You think you're a nerd if you play it, and you're a loser if you're in more than one league. Did you give him that lecture that you always give me?
I just told him.
Or did you just spare him time?
I just gave him the breakdown of Higgins and told him that.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, I gave him the basic generic breakdown. But I do think if you look at, go ahead.
If you wrap it all into a package, it's Higgins. I mean, Kirk's on this roster. He's only guaranteed to be on this roster 1 year. Like, there's no guarantee Christian Kirk, even if he plays well, is on the team next year. I know Jaden Higgins is on the team for the next 4 seasons, and I know he can play outside maybe from day one. So long-term outlook, it's Jaden Higgins for me. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then Noel is interesting. It's just, we're going to have to see what he looks like once Kirk is out of his way. I do think it's possible that when Noel is out there, he shines, but in the short term, he definitely has Kirk in his way, at the very least, if we're looking at it from a fantasy outlook. And I also do wonder, is there either one of these young guys, like, Nico Collins is going to be wide receiver 1 for the next few years. I think that's the direction that we would go. So I don't see like either one of these guys just overtaking him in wide receiver 1, but you never know. We didn't think we'd be talking about Nico Collins now compared to how we were talking about him 3 years ago. So a lot can happen. It'll be interesting just to see how the target share goes and what goes on there, because I don't know what the target shares are going to look like. And it's I don't want to call it an embarrassment of riches, but I'll say it's an embarrassment of intrigue, if that makes sense when it comes to the wide receiver position. It's not an embarrassment of riches. It's an embarrassment of intrigue, which really, like, long term, you can say that there's more intrigue with this wide receiver group now than there was a year ago when we thought that short term it was going to be one of the best wide receiver groups in the league. So life comes at you fast when you're talking about and covering football.
Conversations about the best 3-man wide receiver room in football a year ago, and now it's like, hey, some pretty good rookies behind this veteran who's been hurt for a couple of years that you just traded for. Like, it's big, it's funny you bring up intrigue, because if you told me, like, if I put the Packers wide receiver room up next to the Texans wide receiver room, as you just talked about Golden, I would actually say there's more long-term intrigue for the Texans than there are the Packers. Like, I think 1 through 6, the Packers probably have an argument to be better now. But I mean, Golden, he's very similar to what they already have. Like, he's not a head above those guys. In a pseudo fantasy draft of the two teams' wide receivers, Nico Collins is clearly the top pick. And then if you're talking about long term, you might even go to 2 of the Texans guys before you get down the roster on Green Bay. So intrigue is certainly there, and I'll be excited to see how they get Noel on the field, because he has tools that are undeniable that you can't keep on the bench that some of these other guys don't have. He probably is the best pure speed wide receiver they have.
Yeah, and I mean he can do a hell of a lot. It's a really, really intriguing wide receiver room, and it becomes even more intriguing of a discussion when you start talking about it from a 2025 and then a beyond 2025 perspective. That's one of the things that they've done in the offseason that's interesting. My real comment was, man, what a crappy year to be drafting at the top at the wide receiver position in a dynasty league. That was really kind of my response. I know I'm not a dynasty league guy, but this doesn't seem like the ideal type. But.
No, this was not the year to be. I mean, this was you kind of wanted the turn there in the back end, so you get you a couple of running backs probably. Like, I mean, Travis Hunter maybe is, if you had the top, but after that, yikes.
Not great. Running back 2, who is RB2 will be another question. They obviously brought in Nick Chubb. Dare Ogunbowale is a guy that they love. He's been RB1 with Mixon and Pierce out. And then there's just a bunch of other names. I don't want to call this an embarrassment of intrigue. This is just an embarrassment of a lot of bodies.
Yeah, there's not much intrigue here, and it's kind of a scary spot to be in for a team that is potentially a Joe Mixon injury away from not being able to run the football. Like that's where they are. If they had to play a game tomorrow, I guess they'd put Dare Ogunbowale on the field. I would think by the time they have to play a game on an actual timeline and schedule that we know is coming up, like if we knew Mixon wasn't playing against Minnesota in the first preseason game, I would tell you Nick Chubb is running back 2. That'd be my guess. It's not a great guess because they have an infatuation with Dameon Pierce, though perhaps that's waning because when he was mentioned in the offseason by Caserio, it was special teams first for him, and they still did add Chubb. But your guess is as good as mine. They could have a rotating cast at running back 2 if Chubb doesn't lock it down.
Yeah, they could definitely have a rotating cast. Let's go to the chat and the super chat real quick. HDAV Traveler, aka Austin Jack. You ain't never hate. Swarm. Afternoon, me amigo. Trill Kick X says, watching the best in the business. He's in Honolulu, Hawaii, about to fly home. Look at that. Any chance we see Locksmith practice a lot more at nickel in early August? I would say probably not, but we'll definitely get into the cornerback discussion a little bit later on. So you actually got some foresight here. I don't think they're opposed to it, but I mean, he's established himself as kind of an outside guy.
I do believe there are looks where they're going to have him defend the guy inside.
Yeah, I think in the red zone, they were actually doing it a little bit. He was outside too, but in red zone and team, he was on the inside. They actually gave Tremont Smith some reps on the outside. So I could see it. I think his skill set is still equipped to where he's really good at it, but Jalen Petre's kind of the inside guy. And then they're just going to get creative and exotic with it.
If they can get enough trust in someone to be the outside guy while he bumps inside, it allows DeMeco Ryans to really kind of play with his defensive back matchups and put them in a intriguing spot that you don't always see them in. So it's pretty interesting.
On the Pierce and Chubb question, I think this is it. I didn't read all this, so who knows? He said, Q says, I know this is random. Do y'all know Paul Gallant personally? He said that Pierce is ahead of and likely would make the team over Chubb. Want to ask who he buys his drugs from. I do know Paul.
I know Paul as well.
I do not. It's always dangerous.
I do not agree with him.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a quote or what. Like, I'm always kind of hesitant to react to like quotes, telephone tag wise, but just on the sake of this, we haven't seen Dameon Pierce this whole offseason, and quite frankly, staying on the field has been an issue for Dameon Pierce. And I think that a lack of confidence in Dameon Pierce would be a representation of why Nick Chubb is here. So I would say that there's a very low confidence level right now in Dameon Pierce. So I don't know that Dameon Pierce has the edge. I would say sometimes the unknown is better than the known. And what we know about Dameon Pierce is for the last 2 years, there's been times where he's been borderline unplayable and they haven't even wanted to put him on the field. And they brought in Nick Chubb and they wonder what he still has. So I wouldn't say that Dameon Pierce has the edge over Nick Chubb.
I would also say Nick Chubb's practiced 2 times more than Dameon Pierce has in the offseason workouts. So
Crazy.
And he got here last week. So
yeah.
That's that. Yeah, it'd be tough to say definitively this or that when it comes to the running back room because they just haven't done anything of note. The running backs, it's not like they've had like between the tackles practice or anything like that.
All right, tight end 2. Who is TE2?
To me, this is Cade Stover
Yes,
and pretty healthy lead over the other options. Brevin Jordan's still coming back from a knee injury. Lachey's a rookie. Irv Smith seems to be, a clear depth piece should he make the team. So this pretty clearly to me seems to be Cade Stover, and it'd be pretty disappointing if this got wrestled away from him.
He looked good, man. I mean, I think he looks really good. He almost looks smaller, like not skinnier. I don't know. He seems a little bit quicker, a little bit leaner. I don't even know who's competing with him at this point. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it seems like he has a pretty firm grasp of TE2. And we can say the same thing about Brevin Jordan as we did Dameon Pierce, although I don't think they ever really lost trust in Brevin Jordan. Matter of fact, that they've shown extreme faith in Brevin Jordan at times when perhaps it even felt like it would have been appropriate to not.
Sure.
2 years ago, he told me, he didn't think he was going to make the team. I mean, he was fighting for his roster spot and he ended up getting hurt and they put him on the team. So we don't know what Brevin Jordan is going to look like when he comes back, but we do know that they believe in him. We also know it's kind of a different element. I don't want to say Chubb and Pierce, like the RB2 discussion, they're the same type, but I mean, I think their ultimate roles are kind of the same. I think Cade Stover and Dalton Schultz can still be TE1 and TE2, and Brevin Jordan's role doesn't overly get impacted, assuming that he's equipped to do what they believe he can do.
Yeah, he might have been a matchup tight end anyway, regardless of how healthy he's going to be. So, yeah, it's again pretty comfortably Cade Stover for me to answer this.
Yeah, that's an easy one. Who is the starting left tackle?
Cam Robinson is who I would say.
I didn't look too confident.
It's that he's rotated with Ariante Ursary at left tackle. So to me, those are the only 2 options. It's either the rookie or the veteran. And Cam Robinson's looked better than Ursary in whatever you can glean from OTAs and minicamp, which the Texans have done I don't want to say it's like a campaign, but they've made it pretty clear they weren't deciding anything when it came to the offensive line in OTAs and minicamp, and they got to put the pads on. You got to see it then. But Robinson feels like he moves better on some of the, the light running stuff that you could actually observe, and he's had better performances for whatever you can glean from OTAs and minicamp. So I would say Robinson and Ursary challenging him, but also challenging Blake Fisher for Fisher's spot over there too. So, but I'd say Cam Robinson.
Yeah, I'll say Cam Robinson. There's not any reason to change that. I guess when the pads come on, we'll get a better idea, but I would say Cam Robinson. He's your most experienced. He's the guy. Will there be a fullback? We're not going depth on here. Will there be a fullback? They got one option, I think. They got one option. It's someone that is very familiar with the system and what they want. I was mispronouncing the name. Give the people the right pronunciation of the name.
It's either Jakob Johnson or no fullback.
All right, Jakob Johnson. Jakob Johnson, for those of you that feel that it's Jacob Johnson, as I did. This one's interesting because I actually think he's a better receiver than perhaps we knew. Very smooth in drills. They throw it to him out of the backfield a little bit. I don't think that's going to be enough for them to keep a fullback around, though. His receiving skills, I do think it could be a bonus. He does have some history as a lead blocker. He was in New England. He was also with the Raiders with Josh Jacobs. Hard J there. Josh Jacobs, not Josh Jacobs, Josh Jacobs. So it's him or bust. I don't know if the fullback's that important, but it goes back to the Andrews philosophy and the Trent Brown philosophy, where these guys, for different reasons, I know it's offensive line versus fullback, they were brought in by Popovich and Caley and Caserio, and immediately you kind of see Andrews as the first team center, and you see Trent Brown as a very, very vocal piece of the instruction that they're trying to get to these young offensive linemen. So I think they have a vision for him. I just don't know if the numbers are going to add up.
I feel like you could figure out what to do with your rushing attack without a fullback. It seems to be something that is becoming extinct, even amongst minds that like to have a little bit of a throwback running option where you would have seen fullbacks. I don't believe they're going to keep a fullback.
Well, I do think that it might not be active, but I don't know that this guy's going to get picked up. So I could see him being on call, on standby, maybe active certain weeks.
Practice squad promotion.
I can very easily see that. I don't think you're going to cut him and all of a sudden someone's just going to be foaming at the mouth to bring him in. So maybe you have him on standby. Maybe you have him kind of at your disposal. And maybe sometimes you have a fullback, sometimes you don't. Maybe sometimes it's an adjustment if other positions are banged up. So I could see him hanging around. But as far as like when the original active roster comes out, don't know about that.
This would also be a position that's affected by how comfortable you are at the tight end spot too. Because if you felt good, okay, we know Schultz and Stover on the team. But if you also felt good about Brevin Jordan and you liked what Luke Lachey, the rookie 7th rounder, had brought to the table, then maybe you opt to keep the extra tight end versus the fullback and just make it work that way. So as far as 53, I'd bet against the fullback, but him staying around the organization, it's a good point by you.
Next one, cornerback 3. Who is CB3? They said goodbye to Ronald Darby. He gone. They did trade up for Jalen Smith on day 2 of the draft.
Darby said bye to them.
I'm sure they said bye though.
He broke up with football and then he broke up with them.
Yeah, and he stole money. But Darby's gone. They traded up for Jalen Smith. They brought back Miles Bryant. They have a bunch of guys after him. Who is CB3?
Well, this one's easy for me. It's Smith.
Tremont Smith? He did look good. He did look good in minicamp. You're talking about
Jalen Smith.
Oh, okay. Just asking because Tremont Smith did make some plays on the outside. He was doing his thing in team red zone.
You're not wrong about that. Like Tremont Smith pissed off Nico Collins, and it's hard to piss off Nico Collins. Now he got the wrath of Nico Collins for pissing off Nico Collins when
if you're betting 500 against on jump balls against Nico Collins, you might be a good CB3.
When you get put on an off-season poster, at least they gave you the opportunity.
Yes. If you're going 50-50 on 50-50 balls against Nico Collins, then you might be a CB3. But no, I think they bring in someone. I don't know how important this position is in this defense. Given the fact it was, I will say this. I do think if Jimmy Ward was going to be healthy and if Jimmy Ward was going to be on this team, I do think it would have been nice to have him kind of as like another inside guy. So I do think this kind of, if we're talking about the Ward impact, I know you still feel good about your starting safeties and you feel good about the depth, but I think in this situation, you kind of get, when you're talking about a guy lining up inside, you do get kind of negatively impacted by Jimmy Ward potentially not being on the squad next year.
Yeah, see, it's
this season.
What do people consider cornerback 3? Because a lot of people consider it to be the slot guy, and then some people consider it to be the outside backup. That's kind of how I talk about it. Is I consider that player to be the outside backup because if you're replacing Petrie, then I would call that nickel or star or the Petrie position, and I wouldn't necessarily call that a cornerback depth chart thing. So I'd say Smith outside, and just because they gave us that that unique look in one of the practices where you had Smith and Lassiter and Stingley and Petrie all on the field in sort of that, I guess it'd be a dime package. So they did, and then a lot of good it did Smith to be on the field with those guys. Christian Kirk cooked him 3 seconds after he stepped on the field. But they clearly like him a lot. He's had a moment here or there in some of the practices. If he grows enough, maybe they are comfortable enough with him being that backup outside cornerback, and then maybe even sneaking down there and playing a little bit behind Petrie and spelling him if he had to, because he played inside and outside at USC.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do this. It is like, if you're gonna, maybe this is kind of unfair because corners struggle early a lot of the times, but if you're going to trade up for someone on day 2 of the draft, I would hope that he can at least be a solid-ish option at number 3 corner. Like, I don't think that's too much to ask.
He needs to crack the 2 deep. You're going to make that investment in him. He's a top 100 pick. He needs to crack the 2 deep right off the bat.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean he goes out there and balls out right away, but you should at least feel like somewhat comfortable that if you do lose somebody in a given week, like let's pretend Ronald Darby was CB3, that he would be able to step up and be at least a viable option out there. So I agree with you on Smith. I do think maybe they bring someone else in. I also do wonder how important it is. It is SNL. Let's go back to the chat.
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
James R says over under Will Anderson Jr. 17.5 sacks, money line for Nico, offensive player of the year.
Oh, geez.
17.5. I'll take the under.
I'll take the under as well.
But I do think he's going to have over 10, at least 12, 13. Money line for Nico, offensive player of the year, I would say no.
He's 18-1 right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to throw $10 on it, go ahead. He would have to stay healthy.
I mean, think about the offensive player of the year is such a – I mean, he with his history, it's just very hard for him to win it.
It's typically an RB.
And, like –
if it's not a QB, and maybe a wide receiver, depending on –
I mean, think about the wide receivers that right off the bat you would assume are going to have more numbers than or bigger numbers than Nico. Well, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson right off the bat. Maybe Puka Nacua because there's not a consistent number 2 option. Or I guess they got Devontae Adams. Yeah, but even then, I don't think he's – I don't know if he's a volume guy. I think there's going to be some extra volume headed Puka's way.
Yeah.
And so – right off the bat, there's 3 wide receivers he has to be better than. He has to be better than Saquon Barkley. He has to be better than Jahmyr Gibbs. He has to be better than Bijan Robinson.
This is a no.
Derrick Henry, CeeDee Lamb. If Christian McCaffrey plays this year, Christian McCaffrey, Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's too many competitors, and the odds aren't good enough right now.
Yeah, that's a no. David White says the British Bulldog has returned. He's a running back, though. He's not a fullback.
Yeah, they have been practicing with the running backs now. So
we'll see if that changes.
See if some of that that special teams usefulness that he had initially and is able to help him carry over to the running back position, which it's not the most settled running back spot ever.
The Jork Texan says any good lineman out there to trade or free agents. I don't look. They basically have a group of mid to bottom tier free agent offensive linemen. They basically have that. That's like their entire roster. So no, I don't think there's any like clear upgrades out there for them.
They seem fairly content to go into battle with the crew that they have right now. And for all the conversation points that have popped up, especially from D'Amico Ryans about how together the offensive line room feels, it feels like anybody added now might start on the outside and have to work their way in. If they're good enough players, sure, but it seems like their offensive line is already in the building, and they just have to trim off who's not going to be a part of it.
All right. On the defensive side of the rock, who is LB2?
Is it just Henry Toto, even though he's had the offseason, he's worked out on the side field this so far? Is it just easy to say Henry Toto because he played well next to Azeez Al-Shaair last year?
I would say Christian Harris is
Wow.
LB2. I would buy stock in Christian Harris.
Wow.
Yep. That's where I would go.
I mean, probably not what I would do. I just right away trust him that much in 2 linebacker sets. I mean, he's a much better athlete than To'o. Okay, now here I have to think about this. He played better down the stretch in 2023 than To'o played in 2024.
Way better.
So
Wasn't close.
I just wonder from a reliability standpoint, can you give him all these opportunities and then, all of a sudden.
It's a good platoon. It's a good platoon, worst case scenario. I'm just buying the upside. Well, I know what Henry Toto is, solid. But what Christian Harris is at his best, it's a game changer. Don't see it a lot, but yeah, game changer.
1 week injury turns into a 3-month injury, and
that happens. Yes,
that's can't see him.
Trill Kick X says, with or without Jimmy, does the Blob still live? Yeah. Baby Legion of Boom is still alive. Yes, it's still alive.
Thank goodness for CJ Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah, thank goodness. Someone brought up EJ Speed. EJ Speed didn't look bad. D'Amico coached him up. That's not a terrible thing. I think he's more of a reserve guy in a perfect situation, but it wouldn't be terrible if we're talking LB2 to put a bet down on Speed at this point.
They very well could just have linebacker by committee behind Azeez Al-Shaair.
They might start shuffling linebackers like they do backup edge guys.
Like, oh, okay, this week we need the linebackers to cover a little bit more. Here's Nick Neiman. Okay, we need a little bit more ferocity and aggressiveness. Here's Christian Harris. We need a sure tackler. Well, here's Henry. We need somebody, just go be a crash test dummy for a week. Here's EJ Speed. Like, there could be different scenarios for different guys.
Who are the 5 DTs? I'll let you take this one.
This one was not easy to figure out because, do I just automatically assume Foley Fatukasi's on the team? I can't do that. If he gets banged up in training camp or he's not healthy in training camp, just because you're a veteran that they previously relied on doesn't mean you're making the team. See Noah Brown last year. So I would tell you for sure.
Settle.
Sheldon Rankins and Tim Settle.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you those for sure right now.
100%.
I would then go and say Mario Edwards for sure.
Yeah, probably.
There's 3. Now I got to find 2 more out of Keontae Hamilton, Tommy Togiai, Kurt Heinisch, Foley Fatukasi. I'll go Fatukasi and I'll go Hamilton.
Okay. I feel like they like Togiai a lot, though.
I know. If you told me Tommy Togiai was making it instead of Hamilton, I'd believe you.
Yeah, they like him a lot.
Oh, man, now I feel bad I left Togiai off.
It's all good. It's a cluster. We'll see. We got plenty of time.
Who's more likely to sneak onto the practice squad? I'd say probably Hamilton. So maybe you do it that way.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't envy when they have to make decisions like that. Who are the backup D ends?
Derek Barnett and Dylan Horton. For sure.
Taylor.
And then Darrell Taylor. And Casey Toohill and Danico Autry. I know. I would tell you for sure.
Final answer on Danico Autry. The other thing is they can move him inside on 3rd down too, so they like that.
I don't know that I can trust Danico Autry.
No, I mean it's been pretty constant. He hasn't been able to be on the field, but
I feel good. I feel confident saying Barnett and Horton, yes and yes, and then it's trying to figure out who the 5th or maybe 6th guy is. Toohill had some really nice moments, but it's against backup defense or backup offensive linemen, or what we would assume to be backup offensive linemen. So it's hard to say. Yeah, it's going to be him.
No, the D line's interesting. It's interesting once you start going on the back end. It's interesting, and they could always just bring someone in too. That is the bring in danger right there.
Solomon Byrd had, over the course of 5 open practices, I counted nearly 10 sacks. So You know, there's some decent competition. You know who the two big dogs are. You know about Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, but they're going to put those other guys on the field. So who are they? You know, that's Barnett and Horton are two pretty comfortable exclamations, I would say.
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
The Rhino says, I know you guys going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting the next few weeks. Appreciate you keeping the content coming. It don't stop, man. Even during vacation, it don't stop. So
yeah, appreciate you, Rhino.
We appreciate you. So we'll see how this whole thing goes. What did we miss? What did we screw up? Where were we wrong? The wide receiver position, obviously the most interesting one, but there is plenty more where that came from. Subscribe, like, ride along. Always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, whether it's June or right in the mix of the season, we're all in it together.
Eat good, sleep good, be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.
See, I didn't cut you off this time.